So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rick Catalano. I'm a Senior Solutions Architect here at Melillo Consulting. And today we're going to talk about what you missed at Dell World 2025. Again, no surprise here that Dell is moving in this direction. And the question is, what is the direction? So if you rewind the clock a little bit and you talk about what AI is, and I'll put this up on the screen so you can kind of see what's going on here. When you look back 2 years ago to 2023, when AI first really started to be a buzzword, there was the parts and pieces all existed for an organization to adopt AI. The problem was it required a lot of talent to do it, and talent that most of us didn't have. It required data scientists, it required creating language models, it required doing modeling, and basically building everything from scratch. Not only was that challenging and difficult, it was pretty expensive to do as well. And the number one question that couldn't really be answered in 2023 was, well, where do I start? Like, what's step one to do this? So now 2 years later, we're starting to see come to market these end-to-end AI solutions. So Dell calls it the industry first end-to-end solution. I should have probably put an asterisk there. I'm not going to swear that they were first. They claim to be first. But really what we get, AI Factory started out as a consulting offering, and it has now really evolved into a complete enterprise level platform that has hardware, software, and services to help you deploy very quickly an AI solution. So what do you get inside of a quote AI factory? Well, for starters, you're going to get Dell servers, right? Dell hardware to run it on, NVIDIA GPUs, high-speed networking, things like NVLink or InfiniBand, and then purpose-built storage, for AI types of deployments. From a software perspective, containerization with things like Kubernetes, uh, NVIDIA's AI enterprise tools to create the workflows, and then Dell's management tools for automation and monitoring. Uh, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later in detail, but the big thing that's hot button topic when it comes to these AI platforms is power and cooling. So liquid cooling is now starting to really be a conversation that a lot of customers are looking at. So everything's there. Why does this all matter and why is it important? Well, quite honestly, it's all about fast deployment of AI. In 2023, AI projects probably would take conservatively 12 to 18 months to get off the ground. With the new AI factory, from power on to inferencing is probably somewhere around 30 minutes now, right? Because of all the integrations, the built-in integrations that are done by Dell with all these components, all the built-in orchestration and the automation. We're talking really minutes to get something up and running. So when I say get something, maybe it's a chatbot that's using your data, because most of us are, at least at this point, all of us should be familiar with the standard chatbot engines that are out there, whether we're talking about ChatGPT or Grok or Gemini or the Microsoft One Copilot. Couldn't think of it, sorry. We're all familiar with those chat engines, and of course they're all talking to public LLMs, which is it's all good and well. But generally speaking, from an enterprise perspective or corporate perspective, do you really want your intellectual property becoming part of a public LLM? And I think generally the answer is no. You don't want that. So creating these private LLMs and on-premise AI infrastructures to deal with your on-prem data. Again, that used to be a very difficult thing to do a couple of years ago. It is now incredibly simple to do, incredibly fast to do. So again, I'll just summarize the AI Factory. It is an all-inclusive platform for delivering AI solutions to customers. Sizing is typically done by tokens Tokens are typically, you can think of tokens as kind of words in a search. So, number of tokens per month is one of the metrics we use to size, what that hardware looks like. So I'll pause right there, shoot questions in the chat, but that is AI Factory, which has been updated from Dell and is their #1 go-to-market platform for AI solutions. So moving on, let's talk about Project Lightning. Project Lightning is a new parallel file system from Dell. And parallel file systems in general aren't new. IBM Spectre's been out for maybe 10 or 15 years. And the #1 question most people ask me is, what is a parallel file system? Well, it helps if you understand what a distributed file system is first, to understand, what a parallel file system does. So a distributed file system that we're all pretty familiar with today is basically lots of nodes with local storage, and data is shared and accessed concurrently by those nodes. So we have basically single network links or single network path to all that storage, and we can sequentially access that information. And that has worked for a very long time. Distributed file system structures have been around since the 60s, and we're all, very familiar with those. They use commodity hardware. They work great for big data. They move a lot of data. The problem is when we need to have that data flow into a significant number of devices simultaneously, this becomes a bottleneck, right? So when we look at a parallel file system, we distribute that data and we stripe it across those same nodes, and that means we can now have concurrent access by multiple clients. And when I say multiple clients, in the context of AI, think GPUs, right? So the speed of my AI solution is going to be determined in some parts, actually a significant part, by how fast I can put the data, how fast can the GPUs get the data from storage. So if I'm on a sequential path, then clearly that's going to create a bottleneck. My networking, and you have to think at scale, right? When we talk about this, if we're talking about, 1 or 2 GPUs, not a problem, but think at scale where I'm maybe doing hundreds, if not thousands of GPUs, I now have a huge problem with getting data into those GPUs. And this, of course, scales to thousands. I think that's the current limit is 64,000 clients or 64,000 GPUs. You can think of it in that context. So this is optimized for high performance computing. We see this in our enterprise customers. A lot of them run parallel file systems for database applications and so on. But we will see this is something that will start to become more important as we move down the road, and more customers at the enterprise and commercial spaces start to adopt AI solutions. So that is basically what Project Lightning is. So Project Lightning has not released yet, so it doesn't have an official name, but it will run on standard PowerScale or ECS hardware. So PowerScale is the old Isilon platform. ECS is the Elastic Cloud Storage platform. It will run on that hardware. And the difference between those two platforms, PowerScale is a file system hardware from Isilon. ECS is Dell's object storage platform. So depending on what the requirements were, file system versus object for the workload, the parallel file system will be able to live on top of that. Launch date for this is expected sometime in Q4, but I don't have an exact date on that. So next topic, part of the AI Factory is Dell has made some announcements around new PowerEdge servers that are purpose-built for, I'll argue they're purpose-built for AI, but really any GPU-intensive application, you could consider these servers. And that is the XE platform. So basically, you see the specs on the screen, just quickly, they're 6th-gen CPUs with up to 128 cores and a boatload of super fast memory. We can put up to 8 GPUs with an NVLink backend into that, up to 10 PCI slots, so we can put a ton of networking in these things, and significant amount of power. So you see up to 3,300 watt power supplies for this platform. So it is a traditional dual CPU server, just as we're accustomed to in other PowerEdge platforms. The difference is, again, this thing, I put up there, size matters. This thing is big. It is a massive piece of equipment. For comparison, the Dell R960 was the reigning champ of physical size, and although not to scale here, this thing is significantly larger in every way, shape, and form than Dell's current PowerEdge platforms. In fact, I will tell you that this thing will not fit in your standard rack. It is, so it's some size specs right here. It is significantly deeper. It is taller. It's 2U taller. It's a 6U chassis. And as you can see by the orange bar, it weighs a ton. It's 250 pounds fully configured. But the reason for that is because, in order to support the AI initiatives that we're looking at, and we're not talking about the consumer grade like the RTX GPUs. We're talking about the HGX, like the B300, the H200, like the real high wattage GPUs that are out on the market today, the real high performance GPUs. And they take a ton of bandwidth. They take a ton of space. They need a ton of power to run. But this is where the performance of AI comes from, right? So when we talk about the processing of tokens per second in order to enable, good, responsiveness from, let's say, a chatbot, it takes a ton of power to do that. So airflow is a big problem. All these components require heavier duty sheet metal. Literally everything about this platform is just large. It is built around the GPU architecture. There's some pretty cool pictures online that you can look at where this thing kind of clamshells in half. So the upper half of it is really a more traditional PC platform, where you'll see, the CPU modules, you'll see memory, you'll see your PCI slots, and then the bottom is all power supplies and GPUs. And it slides out and it kind of clamshells open so that you can have access to those where the GPUs are. Deploying something like that, we really have to dig into the electrical requirements. Most data centers probably can't power this from the get-go. At full scale, small versions of this, probably no problem. But yeah, so there are other, again, cooling is a problem. We need to talk about that. And, the next thing, move on to the next topic, we'll talk about what Dell's doing from a cooling perspective. The market is, for these bigger servers, is really shifting away from air-cooled to liquid-cooled. So let's just jump into that. So Dell is PowerCool is kind of the overall platform name for Dell's liquid cooling technology. So the newest platform that's out there, so liquid cooled's been out there. You can do DLC, it's called direct liquid cooling. You can do that today with a bunch of the different platforms. So in essence, I'm going to have facility water that goes through a chiller. And that chiller is, we then run piping directly into the server. So just as today we would plug in network cards, network cabling, we would plug in our source and return chilled water loops. That goes off to a chiller, and that chiller is a big unit that pulls the heat out of the liquid and then recirculates it back into the rack. Most customers don't have that kind of infrastructure. So Dell came out with this thing called the RDH, the rear door heat exchanger. So this is now a full heat exchanger solution that hangs off the back of your rack. So you don't need to have chillers now. You don't need to have big infrastructure. You don't have pipes running all through the data center, because one of the things that people get a little bit concerned about is, for years we always said can't have water in a data center, can't have sprinklers, can't have water sources, and so on. And now we're saying, no, we're just kidding. You got to put water in to cool all this stuff down. So instead of now running all those pipes everywhere, this still does take facility water, but the difference is that this facility water can be as warm as 96 degrees, and I can still cool the rack with that temperature. So that saves a ton of dollars on infrastructure costs to put in liquid cooling. If you're doing what's called open loop direct liquid cooling. Now, closed loop is something that's been out there, and if anybody's a gamer at home, you might have seen a closed loop system where you've got just liquid cooling directly inside of a chassis. There's at this scale, there's limitations to deploying cooling from that perspective. But this is again fully validated by Dell. We can now, with this rear door solution, we can now basically effectively cool up to 80 kilowatts of power in a single rack. And for some folks that maybe haven't really dealt with those types of challenges, and they say, well, that's never going to be something I've had to deal with. And I could tell you that some of my mid to upper range customers are absolutely dealing with this problem. If you look at what the average amount of power that you can cool in a single rack, it typically hovers somewhere around 19 kilowatts. 19 kilowatts is roughly 4 30-amp circuits worth of power. And it does not take very long. I've had in just the last year, I've had 3 customers hit this problem where we weren't able to really put all the gear we wanted into a rack, not because of power, because we could get the power there, we just couldn't cool it. And adding chillers and liquid level cooling was not going to really be a good option. So this now just gives us another option for that. And I think this is a problem that more customers are going to, over the next, let's say, 5 or 6 years, it's just another problem I think customers are going to have to deal with, which is, as we get, it's not uncommon now to build servers that have dual 500-watt CPUs, to add, some number of GPUs that are currently ranging between 350 and 700 watts each, networking cards, and so on and so forth. The heat output is really starting to be a problem, and it's something that the industry really needs to address. And this is one of Dell's ways to do it. It's fully validated. You have to buy the rack that comes with this heat exchanger, so it does not retrofit over. And the rack is sized to handle the XE platforms, so it has the depth that's required. AI PCs. So we're starting to see a lot of talk about AI PCs. It's like, how do I take data that I have, it's on-prem, and I want to do AI with it. I don't want to necessarily build out, I don't bring in, cooling racks and big CPUs and big GPU servers and all that cost. And it was like, well, is there a way that I can do this, let's say, by running locally, right? And that answer is what they call the Dell Pro Max Plus. There's actually 2 of them, and just in the interest of keeping things clean and simple, it's really the Dell Pro Max and the Pro Max Plus. The difference between those 2 is literally the footprint, right? So the Plus is a portable laptop format, and the non-Plus is basically a tower or desktop format. The big thing here is the addition of a NPU, right, which is different from a GPU. An NPU is a neural processing unit. It's basically built for one reason only, and that's for on-device AI inferencing, which means you can run your models, even your large language models, models with even over 100 billion parameters directly on the laptop or on the tower without having to go out to the cloud. So it runs the latest Arrow Lake HX CPUs. The laptop's both formats support up to 256 terabyte of RAM and capacity up to 16 terabyte of disk, right, in a laptop format. To me, that just blows my mind that we could put that kind of capacity in there. So in the example that I gave of trying to analyze, if I really seriously wanted to do this, and I didn't want to try to upload, a couple gigabytes of file data to a public model, and I wanted to do my own local inferencing of data, this is a platform, an affordable platform that we could consider in order to do that on-prem inferencing. And again, the big thing that allows us to do that is the addition of the neural processing unit. Similar but different. GPUs can be used for AI. It can be used for graphics. There's lots of things you can do with a GPU. A neural processing unit is specifically developed specifically to do AI inferencing only. And they've dealt with things like battery. They dealt with things like cooling. So we get all the best of everything in a portable, easy to use footprint. And I think the market for this is probably, of all the things we talked about today, I think the market for this is probably the highest. These are shipping today, can get these now. But I think this is where most folks are going to take a peek initially, probably for one reason alone, which is, do I want to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars to test out an AI concept? Or do I want to maybe try to run that on a device that's sub $100,000, in most cases sub $30,000, to test out what all of my AI inferencing, and then scale appropriately. So armed with that, those were the top 5 things that I saw at Dell World that I thought would be interesting. They are all AI related. There certainly were a million announcements that occurred at Dell World in literally every platform they had, but these are the ones that got the most traction, the most press, and the most conversation while we were there. And I think that concludes with the content we had for today.